TLR. Boyfriend celebrated being free from me on social media while I was in the hospital, so I made sure his freedom became permanent in the most spectacular way possible. Okay, Reddit, buckle up because this is a wild ride that just concluded, and I need to share this therapeutic mess with someone. I'm still processing everything that happened, but your girl has stories. I've been with Marcus for 5 years. We met at a photography workshop in downtown Seattle where I was teaching basic camera techniques to beginners through my small business. Marcus was one of those students who showed up with a $4,000 camera but couldn't figure out how to get it off auto mode. Red flag number 1, but he was charming and funny and had this way of making me feel like I was the most talented photographer in the world. Fast forward 5 years, and I realized the only thing Marcus was really good at photographing was my bank account draining. Let me paint you a picture of this relationship. I own a small photography studio in Capitol Hill. It's not huge, but I've built a solid client base doing portraits, small weddings, and commercial work. The studio lease is in my name, all the equipment belongs to me, and I've been supporting both of us for the majority of our relationship. Marcus, meanwhile, has been building his influencer brand for approximately 4.5 out of our 5 years together. He has 847 followers on Instagram, most of whom are his family members and photography clients he's met through me. His content strategy seems to involve reposting other people's work with motivational quotes about hustle culture and taking mirror selfies at the gym he doesn't pay for because I bought him the membership. Here's where it gets fun. Marcus has contributed to rent exactly 12 times in 5 years. His name isn't on the lease because his credit score is somewhere in the financial disaster range. When he does occasionally have money, it goes toward protein powder, trendy streetwear, or expensive dinners with his boys while I'm at home eating ramen and editing photos until 2 a.m. But I was in love, right? I made excuses. He was networking, building connections, investing in his future. All that garbage we tell ourselves when we're dating someone who's basically a very attractive financial parasite. 3 weeks ago, I started having severe abdominal pain, like doubled over can't breathe pain. I tried to tough it out because I had 3 client shoots scheduled that week, and Marcus was supposed to help me with equipment setup. Supposed to being the key phrase, because he bailed last minute to attend a crucial networking event that turned out to be day drinking at a rooftop bar. The pain got worse. My friend Jessica, who's been my business partner and voice of reason for years, found me passed out in my studio and drove me to the emergency room. Turns out my appendix had ruptured and I needed immediate surgery. The surgeon said if Jessica hadn't found me when she did, I could have died from sepsis. I was in the hospital for 6 days. 6 days of pain, antibiotics, and recovery. Marcus visited me exactly twice. The first visit lasted maybe 30 minutes because he said the hospital smell was making him nauseous and he needed to get back to work on his brand content. The second visit was to ask if he could borrow my car because his Uber budget was getting tight. Jessica practically lived in that hospital room with me. She brought me decent food, helped me wash my hair, charged my phone, and handled client communications for the studio. She even brought her laptop and worked from my bedside table because she didn't want me to worry about business stuff while recovering. So there I was, doped up on pain medication and trying to process the fact that I almost died, when Jessica gets this expression on her face while scrolling through Instagram. The same expression people get when they smell something rotten but can't figure out where it's coming from. I asked what was wrong, and she tried to deflect, but I grabbed her phone, and there it was. Marcus at some trendy rooftop bar, arm around his ex-girlfriend, Olivia, with the caption, "Finally escaped the controlling workaholic and her impossible standards. Life's too short to spend it editing someone else's vision. Shash new chapter, freedom, authentic living." The post had 67 likes and comments from our mutual friends saying things like, "You deserve happiness, bro," and "Sometimes you gotta choose yourself." Not a single person mentioned that his girlfriend was literally fighting for her life in a hospital bed. I didn't comment. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just laid there and processed while the IV pumped antibiotics into my system. And while I processed, I remembered something very important. Everything in our life together was mine. The studio, the equipment, the client list, the apartment lease, even the Netflix account he spent so much time on. I made some calls from that hospital bed. I called my lawyer cousin in Portland. I called my landlord. I called my business insurance company. And I made a plan. Marcus had been back to our apartment a few times while I was staying with Jessica during early recovery, but he had no idea what was coming. See, Marcus thought he was slick. He thought he could publicly humiliate me while I was vulnerable and then come back to his comfortable life of free rent and borrowed cars. Phase 1. The Great Equipment Liberation. Marcus had been using my professional camera equipment for his content creation for years. My Canon 5D Mark IV, My entire lens collection worth about $15,000, my professional lighting setup, my backup cameras, my tripods, my editing computer, all of it just freely available whenever he wanted to play photographer. Jessica and her brother helped me execute this phase. We went through the apartment and studio and removed every single piece of equipment that Marcus had ever borrowed. Every memory card, every battery charger, every lens cap. We cataloged everything with serial numbers and receipts because unlike Marcus, I keep records of my business investments. But we didn't stop there. Remember how Marcus liked to borrow my car? Well, my car. My rules. I reported my spare key missing and had the locks changed. Marcus no longer had transportation, which was especially problematic since he'd been relying on my vehicle to get to his various networking events. Phase 2. The social media awakening. Marcus's Instagram was full of photos he'd taken with my equipment in my studio, often of clients he'd met through my business. He'd been building his brand quite literally on my back, using my resources and connections. I reached out to about 30 of these clients with a polite message explaining that Marcus was no longer affiliated with my business and that any future bookings should go directly through me. I also mentioned that if they'd paid Marcus directly for any services, they might want to follow up on that, since he wasn't actually authorized to book studio time. Turns out Marcus had been accepting payment from at least 6 clients for private photography sessions in my studio while I was busy with other shoots. He'd been pocketing this money without mentioning it to me. These clients thought they were booking legitimate studio time through my business. Phase 3. The financial reality check. Remember how Marcus had been building his brand for almost 5 years? Well, I decided it was time for a reality check on exactly what that brand was worth. I pulled together every financial record from our relationship. Every rent payment I'd made alone, every utility bill, every grocery store receipt, every time I'd covered his phone bill or bought him clothes or paid for his gym membership. The total came to $127,000 over 5 years. $127,000 that I had invested in supporting Marcus while he pursued his influencer dreams. I didn't demand this money back. Marcus clearly didn't have it. Instead, I did something more strategic. I compiled all this information into a detailed timeline and sent it to 3 key people: Marcus's parents, his brother, and his new employer. Oh, did I mention Marcus finally got a job? 3 days after I went to the hospital while I was fighting off infection, Marcus started working at a trendy marketing agency in Belltown, a job he got through connections I had introduced him to at a networking event I had paid for him to attend. His new boss, Trevor, was someone I'd done headshots for last year. When I reached out to Trevor with concerns about Marcus's character and reliability, including screenshots of the social media posts celebrating his freedom while I was hospitalized, Trevor was very interested in our conversation. This morning, my phone started going crazy. Text after text from Marcus. Where is all my equipment? You can't just take my cameras. I need those for work. This is theft. I'm calling the police. My boss is asking about some timeline you sent him. What did you do? Then the tone changed. Baby, please. I was just upset and scared about your surgery. Olivia doesn't mean anything. We're just friends. I panicked when you were in the hospital. I love you so much. We can work this out. You're my everything. But the most entertaining messages came from his mother, Patricia. Patricia has always treated me like I was some kind of gold digger trying to trap her precious son. She called me sobbing, saying I needed to reconsider what I'd done, that Marcus made a mistake but doesn't deserve to have his life ruined. She said he'd told her about the other things I'd done, the job situation and the equipment removal, and that I was being vindictive and cruel. According to Patricia, I should be grateful that Marcus chose me over someone like Olivia, who apparently comes from money. You know what, Patricia? Maybe I am being vindictive. How but 5 years of supporting someone who couldn't even visit me properly in the hospital, who publicly celebrated being free from me while I was recovering from emergency surgery, that tends to make a person a little vindictive. The lease on our apartment is up for renewal next month. I'm not renewing. I'm moving the studio to a better location in Fremont and getting a smaller apartment nearby. A fresh start without any reminders of Marcus using my Wi-Fi to post content while I worked 60-hour weeks to pay our bills. I don't regret what I did. Not one bit. Eat it. No, I'm not worried about legal consequences. My lawyer cousin confirmed that since Marcus's name isn't on any leases, and he never contributed financially in any documented way, he has very little recourse. Plus, all the equipment was mine with receipts and serial numbers to prove it. Edit 2. For those asking about my recovery, I'm doing much better. Still sore and can't lift heavy equipment yet, but Jessica has been helping with the physical aspects of shoots. My clients have been incredibly understanding and supportive. Edit 3. Yes, Marcus did try to call the police about the equipment. They told him it was a civil matter since he couldn't prove ownership of anything. The look on his face when he realized he'd never paid for a single piece of equipment must have been priceless. Update 1. Holy shit, Reddit. The response to my post has been overwhelming and therapeutic in ways I didn't expect. Thank you for all the support and for validating that I'm not actually the crazy controlling workaholic Marcus made me out to be. As promised, here's what's happened in the 48 hours since my original post. So, remember how I mentioned Marcus's mom, Patricia, called me 17 times? Well, that number has now reached 52 calls in the past 2 days. I finally answered call number 53 because I figured she'd never stop otherwise. Picture this. Me propped up in Jessica's guest room with my incision still healing, eating ice cream straight from the container, doctor's orders for the calories, I swear, while Patricia alternated between sobbing, threatening, and guilt-tripping for a solid 35 minutes. Here are the highlights. Marcus has been crying for 3 days straight. I've never seen him like this. Funny, I cried for 3 days straight when I woke up from surgery and he wasn't there. But sure, Patricia, let's focus on Marcus's feelings. Do you know how much that photography equipment costs? His grandfather helped him buy some of those lenses. Patricia, I have receipts for every single item because I bought all of it with my own money. Marcus's grandfather helped him buy a disposable camera for a family reunion in 2019. He was planning to propose, you know. He showed me the ring. Unless the ring was made of my unpaid bills and his broken promises, I highly doubt it exists. We could press charges for theft. My lawyer cousin already confirmed they can't, but okay, Patricia, you go ahead and try to prove ownership of equipment you've never seen and Marcus never paid for. But here's where it gets really interesting. When Patricia started going off about how Marcus told her I'd been financially controlling him and isolating him from opportunities, I actually laughed so hard I pulled a stitch. So I asked Patricia a simple question. When was the last time Marcus paid rent on our apartment? Silence. Patricia, when was the last time Marcus contributed financially to any shared expense in our relationship? More silence. So I told her. I broke down exactly what Marcus had contributed financially over 5 years. I told her about the $127,000 I'd spent supporting him while he built his brand. I told her about covering his car payments when he was between jobs, about paying for his clothes when he had client meetings, about buying groceries while he spent his occasional income on protein powder and craft beer. But he said he's been supporting your business, she finally whispered. Supporting my business? I've been running a successful photography studio for 7 years. Marcus has been occasionally carrying equipment and eating the catering at events I booked. I didn't argue with her, though. Instead, I offered to email her copies of bank statements, rent receipts, and business records that would clarify the situation. I also mentioned the social media posts he made while I was in the hospital, which she claimed to know nothing about. The call ended with her saying she needed to speak with Marcus and would get back to me. She hasn't called since. Funny how documentation tends to end these conversations. Now let me tell you about the great equipment recovery operation, because several people asked for details. Marcus had been treating my professional equipment like his personal property for years. 3 cameras, 8 lenses, professional lighting setup, tripods, reflectors, my editing workstation. Everything he needed to play photographer while I handled the actual business. Jessica and her brother Jake arrived at the apartment while Marcus was at his new job. It took us 4 hours to locate and pack everything. 4 hours of finding camera batteries in random drawers, discovering memory cards stuck between couch cushions, and unearthing lens filters from places they had no business being. We didn't break anything. We didn't hide anything. We simply moved my property back to my studio where it belongs. I even left behind a printed inventory list so Marcus would know exactly what was taken and could verify that everything was accounted for. The most satisfying moment was when Jake picked up my custom editing workstation, the computer I'd spent $30,500 on, and Marcus had been using to edit his Instagram content, and ceremoniously carried it out like he was liberating it from captivity. Speaking of Marcus's job situation, remember how I mentioned he'd gotten hired at that trendy marketing agency? Well, about that. Trevor, the owner, is actually a really stand-up guy. When I reached out to him with my concerns, he was initially skeptical. But when I showed him the social media posts Marcus made while I was in the hospital, along with the timeline of financial irresponsibility, Trevor's attitude shifted completely. I can't have someone representing my agency who celebrates their partner's medical emergency on social media, he said. That's not the kind of character we associate with our brand. Marcus lasted exactly 4 days at that job. 4 days of what I can only imagine was him trying to figure out how to do marketing work without access to professional photography equipment or a decent computer. The other thing I did, and I'm not sorry about this, was reach out to the 6 clients who had paid Marcus directly for studio sessions. Turns out Marcus had been booking these sessions during times when I was out shooting other clients, essentially subletting my studio without permission and pocketing the money. These clients were understandably upset to learn that their sessions weren't actually booked through my business and that Marcus had no authority to accept payment for studio time. 3 of them are considering small claims court against Marcus. The other 3 just wanted their money back, which Marcus apparently doesn't have. But here's today's big development. Marcus showed up at my studio. I wasn't there, still recovering, and Jessica has been handling the day-to-day operations. But my security cameras caught everything. Marcus tried to get into the building. Couldn't because I'd removed his key access. Then proceeded to pound on the door for about 10 minutes. When that didn't work, he sat on the curb across the street and called me 23 times in a row. I didn't answer, but he left increasingly frantic voicemails. I just want to talk and explain everything. This is all a big misunderstanding. I need my equipment back. I have a client meeting tomorrow. Spoiler, he doesn't have any clients. You're destroying my career. I'm going to tell everyone what kind of person you really are. That last one made me laugh because Marcus has spent 5 years benefiting from exactly what kind of person I really am. Someone who works hard, pays the bills, and supports her partner's dreams even when they're completely delusional. Jessica handled the situation perfectly. She called building security, who asked Marcus to leave. When he refused, they called the police. Marcus left before the cops arrived, but not before he kicked over a planter outside the building, like the mature professional he is. The police report is filed, just in case this escalates further. Meanwhile, I've been getting messages from people in Seattle's photography community. Word travels fast in creative circles, and apparently Marcus's behavior has become something of a cautionary tale. 3 other photographers have reached out to share similar stories about Marcus trying to book shoots through their equipment or contacts. One photographer, Amanda, told me Marcus had approached her last month about collaboration opportunities, which apparently meant he wanted to use her studio and equipment in exchange for exposure and networking connections. She declined, thank God, but now she understands why I looked so exhausted at industry events. Tomorrow, I have a follow-up appointment with my surgeon, and then Jessica and I are looking at the new studio space in Fremont. It's smaller than my current location, but has better lighting and parking. Plus, it's nowhere near any of Marcus's usual haunts. My current lease ends in 3 weeks, and I cannot wait to start fresh in a space that doesn't have memories of Marcus eating my catering while I set up lighting for paying clients. Thanks for listening to this update, Reddit. I'll post again if anything major happens, especially if Marcus attempts another dramatic gesture. Based on his track record, it will either be wildly inappropriate, surprisingly cheap, or somehow make everything about his brand. Possibly all 3. Edit. Several people asked about my health insurance situation. Thankfully, I have good coverage through my business, so the surgery and recovery costs are mostly covered. The real financial impact has been lost income from canceled shoots, but Jessica has been helping reschedule everything, and my clients have been incredibly understanding. Edit 2. For those concerned about Marcus escalating the situation, don't worry. Marcus is fundamentally a coward who only feels brave behind a keyboard. He talks big, but wilts under any real confrontation, which is probably why he waited until I was unconscious in a hospital to celebrate his freedom. Update 2. Reddit. Your girl is back with what I hope will be the final chapter of this saga. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and the resolution has been... Well, let's just say Marcus really outdid himself this time. First, the good news. I'm fully recovered from surgery and back to shooting clients. My new studio space in Fremont is officially open, and it's absolutely perfect. Better lighting, more space, easier parking, 0 memories of Marcus using my Wi-Fi while I work to pay our bills. Now for the Marcus update, which is a doozy. Remember how he showed up at my old studio and had a meltdown on the sidewalk? Well, that was apparently just the warm-up act. The main event happened last week, and it was so spectacularly ridiculous that I'm still processing it. Marcus decided that what our relationship needed was a grand gesture. A public declaration of his changed heart and renewed commitment to being a real partner. So what did this man do? He organized a flash mob. Yes, you read that correctly. A flash mob. He somehow convinced about a dozen people, mostly his gym buddies, and a few former clients who apparently hadn't heard about his recent behavior, to help him stage this elaborate production in Cal Anderson Park, right across from my old apartment building. The choreography involved the group holding up signs that spelled out, "Sorry, Sarah," while Marcus stood in the middle with a bouquet of grocery store flowers and a poster board covered in printed screenshots of his Instagram posts with giant red X's marked over them. But wait, it gets worse. Marcus had also prepared a speech that he filmed and posted to his Instagram story, because of course he did, about how he had lost his way in the darkness of social media validation, and how I was the light that guided his creative soul back to authenticity. The speech included gems like, "I became addicted to likes and forgot to like myself. Sarah's strength in the hospital showed me what real beauty looks like. I want to build our brand together, not compete with it. Yes, he said. Build our brand together. Even in his apology, everything was content. The absolute best part? The flash mob was performed for exactly 0 audience members, because I don't live in that building anymore and nobody else cared enough to watch a grown man have a public breakdown in the park. But Marcus wasn't done. Oh no. He had a whole multimedia approach planned. After the flash mob failed to produce me, shocking, Marcus pivoted to plan B, the apology video series. He posted a 7-part Instagram story series titled, How I Lost the Love of My Life and What I'm Doing to Win Her Back. Each video was Marcus in different Seattle locations that were apparently significant to our relationship, talking about his journey of self-discovery and commitment to growth. Locations included the coffee shop where we had our first date, the photography supply store where I'd bought equipment, and bizarrely, the emergency room where I'd had surgery. Yes, he went to the actual hospital and filmed himself apologizing outside the building where I almost died. The audacity is breathtaking. The videos got a combined total of 43 views, mostly from his family members, and people hate watching his breakdown. But the pièce de résistance was the business proposal. Marcus created an actual business plan for how we could merge our brands and become Seattle's power couple of creative entrepreneurship. This document, which he had printed and bound at FedEx, using whose money I wonder, outlined his vision for Sarah and Marcus Creative Solutions. The plan included me providing all equipment and studio space, Marcus handling creative direction and social media strategy, a 50-50 split of all profits, joint Instagram account with alternating posting schedules, couples photography workshops where we'd teach authentic relationship dynamics. The business plan was delivered to my new studio by courier, along with a single red rose and a note that said, 3rd time's the charm. Let's build something beautiful together. I actually kept the business plan because it's so delusionally entertaining that I show it to friends when I need a laugh. Marcus seriously thought that after publicly humiliating me, stealing from my clients, and having his family harass me, I would agree to give him half my business in exchange for his Instagram expertise. After the business proposal was inevitably ignored, Marcus's behavior took a concerning turn. He started showing up at networking events I attend, always positioning himself where I'd have to see him. He'd wear his most expensive clothes, which I had purchased, and spend the entire event trying to make eye contact while looking wounded and artistic. At one event, he actually approached the organizer and suggested they book Sarah and Marcus Creative Solutions for a presentation about collaborative creative partnerships. When told that wasn't a real business, Marcus insisted it was in development and that I was just playing hard to get for marketing purposes. This is when I decided to involve professionals. I consulted with a lawyer about getting a formal cease and desist order, but they recommended trying a more direct approach first. So I did something I probably should have done weeks earlier. I called Marcus. One conversation. That's all it took to end this entire circus. Marcus, I said when he picked up on the first ring, I need you to listen very carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. We are never getting back together. Not today, not next week, not after you've completed whatever self-improvement journey you think you're on. I don't want your business proposals, your flash mobs, your apology videos, or your presence at my professional events. What I want is for you to build the life you said you wanted when you celebrated being free from me. So go be free. There was a long pause, and then Marcus said something that perfectly summarized our entire 5-year relationship. But what am I supposed to post about if we're not together? Marcus, I said, that is no longer my problem to solve. I hung up and blocked his number. Since that conversation, the harassment has stopped. The dramatic gestures have ended. Marcus has apparently moved back in with his parents in Spokane and is working at his uncle's auto parts store while he regroups and refocuses his brand strategy. According to mutual friends, he's been telling people that I was too successful for him and that our relationship ended because he felt intimidated by my achievements, which is actually the first honest thing he said about our relationship in years. As for me, I'm thriving. My new studio is booked solid through the holidays. I've hired an assistant to help with editing and client management. I'm sleeping better, eating regular meals, and remembering what it feels like to come home to my own space without wondering what Marcus has broken or borrowed while I was working. Jessica and I are planning a business expansion into event photography, something I never had the bandwidth for when I was supporting Marcus's career. We're even looking into that couples workshop idea, but focused on healthy relationship dynamics and creative partnerships. Definitely not featuring Marcus's expertise. The most unexpected development has been the number of messages I've received from other women who've been in similar situations. Apparently, Marcus's behavior pattern is more common than I realized, and sharing my story has helped other people recognize and address their own situations. One woman, Rebecca, reached out to tell me her ex had also used her professional equipment and connections to build his brand while contributing nothing financially. She'd been feeling guilty about ending the relationship until she read my posts. She's now successfully running her own design business and hasn't looked back. Another woman, Kim, shared that her ex had also celebrated their breakup on social media while she was dealing with a family crisis. She'd been questioning whether she'd overreacted by cutting contact completely. Spoiler alert, she hadn't. It's been therapeutic to realize that I wasn't uniquely naive or stupid for staying in that situation for so long. Love makes us do dumb things sometimes, and recognizing patterns is the first step to breaking them. I've continued working with my therapist to understand why I was attracted to someone who needed so much fixing, and why I was willing to sacrifice so much of myself to support someone else's dreams. The insights have been painful, but necessary. The bottom line: I spent 5 years building Marcus's life at the expense of my own growth, and now I get to spend however many years I want, building something that's entirely mine. To everyone who's been following this saga, thank you for the support, the advice, and the reality checks when I needed them. This community has been unexpectedly therapeutic during one of the most difficult periods of my life. And to anyone who's currently in a similar situation, you deserve a partner who celebrates your successes instead of competing with them, who supports you when you're vulnerable instead of using it as an opportunity for freedom, and who contributes to building a life together instead of just consuming what you've built alone. Marcus got exactly what he wanted: freedom from the controlling workaholic and her impossible standards. And I got exactly what I needed: freedom from someone who saw my strength as a resource to exploit, rather than a quality to admire. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. You just have to let it go. Final edit. This will be my last update unless something truly extraordinary happens. I'm focusing on moving forward rather than looking back. But I wanted to thank everyone one more time for helping me see clearly during a very confusing and painful time. For those asking about whether I'm dating again, absolutely not yet. I'm focusing on my business, my friendships, and figuring out who I am when I'm not trying to fix someone else's life. Maybe someday I'll be ready to share my space with someone again, but they'll need to come with their own equipment, their own income, and their own dreams that don't require me to fund them. Marcus taught me a valuable lesson. The right person will want to build something with you, not just live off what you've already built. Next time, I'll know the difference. Seattle's photography community is small but mighty, and word travels fast. I have a feeling Marcus's reputation will precede him for quite a while, which means other creative women might be spared the experience I went through. As for the studio, business is booming. Turns out when you're not spending 60% of your energy managing someone else's emotional and financial chaos, you have a lot more bandwidth for actual success. The compost king from the original story had the right idea about breaking down and rebuilding. He just didn't realize he was the thing that needed to be composted. Sometimes growth means addition, and sometimes it means subtraction. In my case, subtracting 180 pounds of dead weight was exactly what I needed to bloom. Thanks for everything, Reddit. Keep supporting each other out there. Bonus update: The Aftermath Chronicles. I know I said that would be my final update, but Reddit, the universe apparently wasn't done with this story yet. It's been 2 months since Marcus moved back to Spokane, and the ripple effects of his Seattle meltdown are still providing entertainment. Last week, I got a message from Amanda, the photographer who Marcus had tried to collaborate with. Apparently, word of Marcus's behavior had spread through the Pacific Northwest photography community faster than I expected. She forwarded me a screenshot of a Facebook post from a photography group in Spokane, where Marcus had introduced himself as a freelance creative consultant specializing in brand development and social media strategy. The post included several photos that looked suspiciously like work he'd done using my equipment in my studio. When Amanda and I looked closer, we could literally see my studio's distinctive brick wall and lighting setup in the background of his portfolio images. But here's the kicker. Marcus was advertising his services at $150 per hour for professional photography consultation, and claiming 5 years of experience running a successful Seattle studio. He was literally trying to sell my business experience as his own expertise. I screenshot the post and sent it to 3 other photographers in the Spokane area, along with a brief explanation of Marcus's actual qualifications. Within 24 hours, Marcus's post had been reported and removed from the group, and he'd been banned from posting in several local photography forums. The best part? One of the Spokane photographers, David, actually knew Marcus from high school and had been considering hiring him for a wedding shoot collaboration. David messaged me to thank me for the heads up and shared that Marcus had been bragging at their high school reunion about his successful photography business in Seattle and his high-profile creative partnerships. David said, "I always wondered how Marcus went from barely passing shop class to running a photography empire. Now it makes sense." he didn't. But wait, there's more drama brewing back here in Seattle. Remember Olivia, the ex-girlfriend who was in those celebratory social media posts while I was in the hospital? Well, she reached out to me last month with some interesting information. Turns out Marcus had been telling her for weeks before that party that we'd been growing apart and that I was too focused on work to maintain a real relationship. He'd convinced her that we were basically already broken up and that I was just using him for his creative input on my business. Olivia said she felt terrible when she found out the truth about the timeline and my hospitalization. She also shared some text messages that Marcus had sent her after his grand gesture failures, where he basically tried to get back together with her too. In these messages, Marcus described me as psychotic and vindictive, and claimed that I'd stolen his entire photography setup and destroyed his reputation out of jealousy. He told Olivia that he was considering legal action against me for business defamation and theft of creative assets. Olivia, who apparently has more sense than I gave her credit for, replied to these messages with, "Marcus, those weren't your assets. That wasn't your reputation, and based on what I'm hearing, she didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself." She's since blocked him on all platforms and warned several mutual friends about his pattern of lying and manipulation. Apparently, Marcus tried the same networking collaboration approach with her that he'd used with other photographers, suggesting they could build a content creation empire together using her family's money and connections. The plot thickens with Marcus's family situation too. Remember Patricia, his mother who called me 52 times? Well, she reached out one more time with a very different tone. Apparently, Marcus's behavior since moving back home has been eye-opening for his entire family. Patricia called to apologize again, and to give me some context about what's been happening in Spokane. Marcus moved back in with his parents with the expectation that this would be temporary while he rebuilt his brand and developed new opportunities. Instead, he's been treating their house like a free hotel while spending his days creating content about his journey back to his roots and his authentic small-town values. According to Patricia, Marcus has been borrowing money from various family members for equipment replacements and business development costs. But the money seems to disappear into DoorDash orders and online shopping for trendy clothes. He's been promising to pay everyone back once his Seattle clients start booking remote sessions. But obviously, that's not happening. The final straw for his family came when Marcus applied for a business loan using his father's auto parts store as collateral, without telling anyone. The bank called to verify some information, and that's when his parents discovered that Marcus had been representing himself as a co-owner of the family business, with 5 years of management experience in Seattle. Patricia said, "We realized we'd raised someone who lies so naturally that he probably doesn't even know he's doing it anymore." Marcus's parents have given him 30 days to find his own place and start contributing to household expenses if he wants to stay longer. They've also cut off his access to family credit cards and required him to pay back the money he's borrowed from relatives before they'll help him with anything else. But the most satisfying development has been professional. Remember Trevor, the marketing agency owner who fired Marcus after 4 days? Well, Trevor and I have stayed in touch professionally, and he referred a major client to my studio last month. The project was a complete rebrand for a tech startup, including executive headshots, product photography, and social media content, exactly the kind of work Marcus always claimed he wanted to do. The client loved my work so much that they've booked me for ongoing monthly content creation, which has become one of my most lucrative accounts. The irony that Marcus's bad behavior directly led to me landing my biggest client ever is not lost on me. Trevor mentioned that the tech startup had actually considered hiring Marcus initially, based on some portfolio samples he'd submitted. But when they asked for references from previous clients, and Marcus couldn't provide any legitimate contacts, they moved on. They specifically mentioned being put off by his inability to discuss the technical aspects of photography or provide examples of problem solving in challenging shoot situations. He could talk a good game about aesthetics and branding, the startup CEO told Trevor, but when we asked about lighting challenges or equipment failures, he just kept steering the conversation back to social media strategy. Meanwhile, my business has expanded beyond what I ever imagined possible when I was supporting Marcus's career development. I've hired 2 part-time assistants, booked my first destination wedding, and started offering photography workshops for other small business owners. The workshops have been particularly rewarding because I get to teach people how to create professional content for their businesses without relying on someone else's expertise or equipment. Several attendees have mentioned that they used to think they needed to find a creative partner to handle their visual branding, but now they feel confident doing it themselves. One workshop participant, a bakery owner named Lisa, said, "I was about to hire my friend's boyfriend to do my product photography because he said he was a professional, But after your workshop, I realized I could learn to do better work myself in less time than it would take to coordinate with someone else. That comment made me realize how much of my energy I'd been wasting, trying to teach Marcus skills he had no interest in learning, when I could have been teaching people who actually wanted to grow. The personal growth has been just as significant as the professional success. I've been dating someone new for about 6 weeks now. His name is James. He's a software engineer. And the differences between him and Marcus are so stark that I sometimes wonder if I'm dating an entirely different species. James has his own apartment, his own car, his own hobbies, and his own friends. He pays for his half of dates without being asked, and suggests activities that fit within his actual budget, rather than expecting me to cover expensive plans. When I told him about my photography business, his first question was about what kind of challenges I face as a small business owner, not whether I could help him build his personal brand. Most importantly, when I had to cancel our third date because of a client emergency, James said, "That's exciting that your business is busy enough to have emergency bookings. Text me when you're free and we'll reschedule." Marcus would have sulked for days about me choosing work over him, and probably would have posted something passive-aggressive about being undervalued by people who prioritize money over relationships. James brings his own laptop when he comes over and works on his own projects while I edit photos, instead of hovering around expecting entertainment. He's interested in my work, but doesn't try to insert himself into my business processes. He has his own life that complements mine, rather than depending on mine for structure and purpose. The contrast has been therapeutic in ways I didn't expect. But back to the Marcus aftermath, because apparently he's not done providing content. 2 weeks ago, Marcus started a TikTok account called Authentic Journey Spokane, where he posts videos about finding yourself after losing everything to toxic relationships, and rebuilding your creative identity in a small town. The videos are exactly as cringy as you'd expect. Marcus sitting in various Spokane locations, coffee shops, parks, his parents' driveway, talking about lessons he's learned and how he's focusing on authentic connections and sustainable creativity. In one video, he talks about how his previous partnership was based on unsustainable expectations, and how he's learned that true creativity can't flourish in controlling environments. He never mentions my name, but anyone who knows our history can clearly identify what he's talking about. The comments on these videos are mostly from family members and a few high school acquaintances, saying generic supportive things like, "Proud of your growth," and "Keep staying positive." But there are also several comments from people who seem to know the real story, saying things like, "Wasn't your creativity flourishing with someone else's equipment though?" And "Authentic journeys usually involve paying your own way." The most recent video was Marcus announcing that he's starting a creative consulting business to help other people break free from limiting partnerships and build authentic personal brands. He's offering services including relationship dynamic assessment for creative couples and financial independence planning for artists. I watched this video with Jessica, and we literally couldn't stop laughing. Marcus is trying to monetize the experience of being a terrible partner by positioning himself as an expert on escaping toxic relationships. The audacity is breathtaking. But perhaps the most interesting development has been the response from our former mutual friends. Several people who'd been supportive of Marcus during our relationship have reached out to apologize for not seeing the situation clearly. They'd believed his version of events about me being controlling and work-obsessed, but seeing his behavior post-breakup opened their eyes to patterns they'd overlooked. My friend Kevin, who'd been friends with Marcus since college, said, "I always thought you were a little intense about your business. But now I realize Marcus was just lazy and I was comparing you to him instead of to other successful people." Another friend, Maria, admitted, "When Marcus told us you were financially controlling him, I believed it because you were always the one paying for group dinners. I didn't think about the fact that he never offered or seemed to have money of his own." These conversations have been validating but also educational. I've learned that Marcus had been sharing a very different version of our relationship with our social circle, painting himself as the victim of my ambition, and me as someone who trapped him in a financially dependent situation. According to Kevin, Marcus used to complain that I never let him handle money and that I'd made him feel emasculated by being the primary earner. He apparently told people that I discouraged him from pursuing his own income opportunities because I wanted to maintain control over the relationship. The reality, of course, was that Marcus rarely pursued legitimate income opportunities, and when he did, he'd quit or get fired within a few weeks. I'd taken over financial responsibilities because he'd proven repeatedly that he couldn't handle them, not because I wanted control. But Marcus had framed this as my character flaw rather than his. And our friends had accepted his narrative without questioning why someone would choose to support a lazy partner instead of finding someone who could contribute equally. Understanding how Marcus had been portraying our relationship to others has helped me recognize how manipulation works on a social level. He'd isolated me by convincing mutual friends that my complaints about his behavior were signs of my controlling nature, rather than reasonable responses to his irresponsibility. This has made me more aware of these dynamics in other relationships around me, and I've been able to offer support to friends who are dealing with similar situations. The ripple effects continue to spread through Seattle's creative community too. Marcus's reputation has become something of a cautionary tale at networking events. I've overheard several conversations where his name comes up as an example of someone who tried to build a career on borrowed resources and connections. One photographer mentioned using "pulling a Marcus" as shorthand for someone who overstates their experience and expects others to provide equipment and opportunities without reciprocation. Another creative entrepreneur, she now asks potential collaborators specific questions about their own equipment and financial contributions up front, specifically because of stories she'd heard about Marcus's approach to partnerships. This professional fallout has apparently made its way back to Marcus through mutual connections. According to Amanda, Marcus posted a long rant on his personal Facebook about how jealous people were spreading lies about his collaborative approach to creative work. The post included complaints about toxic industry dynamics and how success people try to keep others down by gatekeeping opportunities and resources. He claimed that his generous spirit and community-focused mindset were being misrepresented as exploitation by people who prioritize individual success over collective creativity. The post got exactly 3 likes from his parents and his brother, and several comments from former colleagues pointing out that collaboration requires mutual contribution, not just one person providing everything while the other person takes credit. Marcus deleted the post within 24 hours, but not before several people had screenshot it and shared it privately as an example of how not to handle professional criticism. Meanwhile, my own reputation has benefited significantly from how I handled the situation. Several potential clients have mentioned that they chose to work with me specifically because of recommendations from people who were impressed by my professionalism during a difficult personal situation. One client said, "Multiple people told me you were someone who handles challenges with class and integrity, and that's exactly the kind of person I want documenting my wedding day." Another mentioned that they'd heard I was someone who builds up other people's businesses rather than trying to extract value from them, which is what they wanted in a vendor relationship. The professional growth has been the most satisfying part of this entire experience. I'm finally able to see what my business can accomplish when I'm not diverting energy and resources to support someone else's pretend career. But I think my favorite development has been the response from other women who've shared similar experiences. I've received dozens of messages from women who recognize their own relationships in my story. Some are still in situations like the one I was in. Others have recently escaped, and many are years into their recovery but found validation in seeing their experiences reflected so clearly. One woman, Jennifer, shared that she'd been supporting her boyfriend's music career for 3 years while he contributed nothing financially and complained that her work schedule interfered with his creative process. She said reading my posts gave her the courage to ask him to move out and start paying his own way. Another woman, Crystal, had been funding her partner's startup for 2 years while he spent the money on personal expenses and blamed her for being unsupportive when she asked for financial transparency. She used my documentation strategies to track where the money was actually going and discovered he'd been lying about almost everything. The most powerful message came from a woman named Diana, who'd been out of a similar relationship for 5 years, but had never fully processed the financial and emotional abuse aspects until reading my story. She said she'd been carrying guilt about abandoning someone who needed help, and hadn't realized that what she'd experienced was actually exploitation disguised as partnership. These conversations have reinforced my decision to share this story publicly, despite the personal nature of the details. If my experience can help other people recognize and address similar situations, then dealing with Marcus's drama was worth it. The final piece of this puzzle has been my ongoing therapy work, which has helped me understand not just what happened with Marcus, but why I was attracted to that dynamic in the first place. My therapist helped me recognize that I'd been drawn to Marcus's neediness because it gave me a sense of purpose and control. Supporting his career made me feel valuable and necessary in ways that my own success didn't. I'd grown up in a family where love was demonstrated through sacrifice and service, so Marcus's constant need for financial and emotional support felt familiar and meaningful. I'd interpreted his dependence as proof that I was important to him, rather than recognizing it as exploitation. Understanding these patterns has been crucial for building healthier relationships going forward. With James, I've been practicing accepting support rather than just providing it, and allowing myself to be valued for who I am rather than what I can give. It's been a significant adjustment to be in a relationship where both people contribute equally and neither person needs to be rescued or managed. But it's also been incredibly peaceful in ways I didn't know relationships could be. The contrast has made me realize how much stress I'd been carrying during my years with Marcus. I'd been constantly worried about money, constantly managing his emotions, constantly making excuses for his behavior to friends and family. I'd thought that stress was just part of adult relationships, but it turns out it was just part of dysfunctional relationships. Now I wake up knowing that my rent is paid, my bills are covered, and my partner is handling his own responsibilities without my oversight or financial support. The mental energy I'd been spending on managing Marcus's life is now available for growing my business, maintaining friendships, and pursuing hobbies I'd abandoned years ago. I've started rock climbing again, something I'd given up because Marcus said it was too dangerous and took time away from building our future together. I've also started learning Spanish, joined a book club, and signed up for a ceramics class. All things I'd wanted to do but never had the bandwidth for when I was functionally supporting two people on one income. The personal growth has been as significant as the business success, and both have reinforced that ending the relationship with Marcus was the right decision despite how difficult it was at the time. As I write this final update, it's been exactly 4 months since Marcus posted those celebrating photos while I was in the hospital. 4 months since I decided that I deserved better than someone who saw my vulnerability as an opportunity for freedom rather than a chance to show support. The woman who was lying in that hospital bed, making phone calls to lawyers and landlords while hooked up to IV antibiotics, feels like a different person now. She was scared and hurt and angry, but she was also determined to stop accepting treatment that she would never give to someone she loved. I'm proud of that woman for choosing herself when it would have been easier to accept Marcus's apologies and return to a familiar pattern of dysfunction. I'm grateful that she had the courage to believe she deserved a partner who would stay by her bedside rather than celebrating his freedom from her medical emergency. And I'm excited to continue building the life she started creating from that hospital bed. A life where love is demonstrated through presence rather than performance. Where partnerships involve mutual support rather than one-sided sacrifice. And where success is celebrated rather than resented. Marcus taught me what I don't want in a relationship, which has made me infinitely clearer about what I do want. For that lesson, despite the cost, I'm ultimately grateful. The compost analogy from the original story was more accurate than I realized at the time. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your garden is remove the weeds that are choking out your growth, even when those weeds have convinced you they're flowers. Now I'm finally free to bloom. The end. To anyone currently in a similar situation, you deserve a love that adds to your life rather than draining it. You deserve a partner who celebrates your strength rather than exploiting it. And you deserve relationships that help you grow rather than requiring you to shrink to make someone else comfortable. Trust yourself, document everything, and remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. Thanks for reading, Reddit. Keep supporting each other out there.